We live in a pretty violent world. We see it all over the news, violence all the time. We see it in people around us, we see it in our own natures, you know. There's this very powerful energy of violence in the modern world particularly, and I suppose it's been through all of history. When you look at the whole history, the whole of evolution, there seems to be violence everywhere. And part of spiritual practice, it often is to embrace the opposite idea, to embrace the idea of non-violence, a quality that was called Ahimsa in Vedic teachings. This was embodied particularly by Gandhi, who used non-violence as his lodestone for all his work, and we associate it with him, but it's part of a much more ancient spiritual tradition that one should exist in a state of non-violence towards other beings. I mean, you see it also in the Buddha. He believed in extending compassion to all beings. He's from a different tradition, although he was strongly influenced by the Hindu traditions. But, you know, the idea that one should always bring compassion. And, of course, in Christianity, in Jesus, the idea about turning the other cheek and love thy neighbour. You know, these are non-violent concepts that really, and actually in the Muslim religion, when you think about it, all of them, all the religions at heart, have a non-violent teaching. You know, a core teaching about non-violence. And yet, you know, obviously it all gets twisted around into different belief systems, and we wage war. And in a lot of ways we're also, you know, with this whole way, we are not really warriors when we do this. We are actually waging war against ourselves, you know. The true warrior wants to conquer himself, conquer his weakness, conquer his foolishness, and become the wise man, the great man, the strong man, you know. But when we adopt violence in our nature, then we are at war with ourselves, and we also, because of that, become at war with the world around us too, because we're not at peace with ourselves, you know. Real non-violence works through example, and I'm not always a good example, because I sometimes lose my temper, and I've been in violent things in the past. Not a violent person, I say, but I mean, there's been violent situations around me which I should have responded differently to. All of us have. You know, I mean, we've all burnt down famous buildings, haven't we? No, but we've all had some form of. We're not all perfect beings, you know. So it is up to us, as if we're on a spiritual path, to develop non-violence. I mean, non-violence towards. I'm not a vegetarian, for example, so therefore I am violent towards animals by not being a vegetarian in some respects, you know, because that creates violent energy within a person too. I mean, from my own case, I kind of have to eat meat because of certain things in the constitution needs, blood and things. But I mean, you know, nonetheless, we still have to embrace this idea of not creating violent energy in the world, because it clearly does problems. It comes mostly in people. Violence comes, if you think about it, it arises out of fear, doesn't it? It arises out of anger. It arises out of sort of a restless spirit. It's basically a very selfish thing too. It comes out of selfishness. These are all qualities that we don't want in ourselves if we really do want to become a spiritual person, you know. And when we do spiritual work such as meditation, when we do giving to others, when we do, you know, we do goodwill to others, when we act in a positive way in life, and we do positive things, we are clearing ourselves of those negative qualities, and we naturally become more peaceful individuals, and the world at whole becomes that way, because we're never going to create peace in this world unless we have peace first and foremost within ourselves, you know. So we have to embrace compassion, we have to embrace love, and actually when all those things come to us, and all those qualities come to us, we have a higher degree of self-respect and respect of others as well when that happens. Every time we go the other way and we resort to a violent situation, whether it be a nation, whether it be a person, whatever, you know, we bring with it shame. We bring with it shame, because there should ultimately be peace within the world and peace within each individual. So, but at the same time, this doesn't mean that you've got to be a doormat, you know. It doesn't mean that you have to accept everything and not respond or act. And I expect in some such situations there may need to be an equal reaction to negative things brought towards you, how we defend violence. But we have to think about the violence from the heart itself, you know. Just because sometimes you might actually get angry with a child doesn't mean you're really angry, does it? It means you're showing that to make them obey and do things as they ought to do, to say, don't touch that fire, you know. That's got to be done in an angry version. So we're play acting. So there is an element of that that can be in ourselves and in the society as well. That I'm saying, doesn't mean we have to sort of, you know, always accept it. I mean, I don't agree necessarily with turn the other cheek, and I don't necessarily agree that everything Gandhi said, but at the same time, at heart, I believe it to be right, you know. That if we do have an ability in ourselves to act non-violent, it's almost an action. It's not just a not doing. I know it's non-violence, not doing violence, but it's almost in itself a thing you do. You behave peacefully. You become the peaceful warrior, you know. That way you actually gain tremendous power, because you gain great self-control, and people with great self-control become the leaders of the world, and become the controllers of their life, become the people that people look to, you know. But it has to come through the power of love, really. But this is how we build the bridges. This is how we break down the violence in the world. This is how we make the world a better place. We'll never do it with politics. We'll never do it with religions and any isms. We can only really ever do it by becoming the solution to the problem, becoming non-violent, peace-loving people. Is the future set, or can we change it? In my new book, I take a mystical journey to India to do magical remedies that will change my personal destiny. I open a 5,000-year-old secret oracle that tells about what will happen in the future. I meet strange siddha yogis with miraculous powers who show me how to eradicate the karma that drives events. What I discover changes everything. We can all change our destiny, and maybe together we can change the future of the world as well. Start making that change. My new book, Mystic Journey to India, that has now been made into a major international documentary series, is now available on Amazon.